Thank you. Welcome to today's Alliance of Women in Workers' Compensation webinar, and a special one it is. I'm Kimberly George, a founding board member of the Alliance, and we are so happy to have you today. The Alliance is a nonprofit focused on you, women in the industry, and certainly the organizations with which we work. We focus on lifting up women in the industry, offering personal and professional development, improve your business acumen skills, as well as leadership. And we also, as you probably know, discuss a lot of industry trends. Someone told me earlier this week that the Alliance is the most collaborative organization out there. And I really like that because we sure try to be. And before we go any further, we really need to thank our sponsors. It's these companies that support us and without whom we wouldn't be we wouldn't be here for you. So these companies support us with our virtual events, our organization with blogs and speaking opportunities. They too believe in lifting up women. They believe we're better together, and that this organization, the Alliance of Women in Workers' Compensation, affords all of us an opportunity to become more diverse and inclusive, which is better for the entire workers' compensation industry. I'm hopeful you'll recall, and we can move this slide, from our Better Together conference in 2021, that we focused on allyship and being an ally. We had Nnaji join us, and we talked about diversity, equality, and inclusion in a very thoughtful way, and the first time for the Alliance in that setting. Since that time, I'm sure you've heard via other Alliance events, we've continued working with Ngozi as the board of the Alliance formally engaged Ngozi in an assignment to help the Alliance become more aware of DEI. How can we be better as an organization that you participate in? How can we bring value to you, our followers? And if we all can advance our individual DEI journeys, our diversity journeys, our understanding, and our willingness to not only help ourselves, but then help our companies, our organizations with which we work, our clients, our customers, certainly the Alliance becomes better as well. So today we have this wonderful opportunity to learn about our DEI assessment. And for those of you that are joining us today, I sure am hopeful you had an opportunity to take advantage of participating in this survey. I think you'll be able to not only learn our trends, but there'll probably be some aha moments as well. For you, maybe even as you think about your company, I know certainly for those of us in the leadership at the Alliance, it's really given us a lot of food for thought, personally, professionally, and certainly a lot of intention around where we take our organization so that, again, we can all lift up not just the women, but also our male allies that are here with us. And I'd be remiss to not thank you for supporting the Alliance, as well as women, because we know that that's part of your leadership style, the core of who you are. And we're really happy you're with us today to help your own journey as well as your team. So with that, I want to hand it over to Ngozi. With Ngozi today is my fellow board member Lisa Hannusch, who was very active in helping us put the survey together, and will join Ngozi in providing you insights into our results. So let's get started.
Thank you, Kimberly. And I am so excited. I have so much excitement today to be with AWWC today, with the Alliance today. And so again, just to reintroduce myself for those that weren't able to participate in the Better Together conference, my name is Ngozi Nnaji. I am the founder and managing partner of ACO Insurance Consulting. We are a recruiting and retention firm focused on BIPOC talent in the industry, meaning the insurance industry. I have 25 years of experience in the industry. I'm kind of one of those insurance nerds, I call myself. I have 2 degrees. I'm a technician by trade, but definitely diversity, equity, and inclusion is a field that has kind of matched my passion around insurance. And so for the last 5 years, I've been working with organizations, much like the Alliance, to not only identify how to increase their activities and efforts around engaging and recruiting BIPOC talent, but then also about how do we keep them, how do we retain them, and how do we create cultures of belonging. And so with that, definitely want to take this opportunity to applaud the Alliance for embarking on this journey, this diversity journey. What we have in front of us right now is the agenda. And so I just wanted to recap what we're going to talk about today. It is very much about kind of learning the results of the assessment, but we wanted to take a step back and initially let's kind of level set and reset and better understand why diversity, why it is so important, not only from a business perspective, but also the personal imperative around diversity. And also, Lisa, being here with me today, really articulate to the audience, to the followers, to you guys, the importance that the Alliance places on diversity and why the Alliance embarked on this journey as well. And so once we've kind of level set and we've kind of given a kind of a background as to the why, we definitely want to share with you what we identify, what we learned, what our findings were, and what our opportunities are, and what the successes have been through this assessment journey. And so with that being said, let's talk about why diversity. So I like this quote: cultivating diversity in all its forms of our content, products, and people is one of the most important business imperatives. So this really sets the stage for why diversity is not only a business imperative, but you see the reference to people, and we'll get into kind of the personal imperative. So this sets the stage for the why. Next slide. So as I indicated, the business imperative is there. It is strong. The business case is strong. And when we talk about business imperative, we're talking about a goal, an objective, something a business wants to obtain that has been identified, or maybe even a strategy or a plan of action that is developed to help achieve that objective. And the goal and the strategy for the objective are clearly outlined, and all the business employees work towards that successful completion. You'll see an image here, and this is coming from the McKinsey. I'm sorry, if you could go back. The McKinsey report, and McKinsey has been investigating the business case for diversity since 2014. So for an extended amount of time, one of the largest kind of research organizations really looking at this topic. They've surveyed, in this particular graph, over 1,000 companies domiciled in 15 different countries, representing various different industries. And based on their research, they have been able to track the progression of diversity and the impact that it has on the bottom line. Focusing on gender diversity here and ethnic diversity, specifically in executive teams, much like the AWWC and its board and its leadership team, McKinsey reports that those companies that were in the top quartile, were 25% more likely to have above average profitability than those in the bottom quartile for gender, and 36% more likely when we talk about race and ethnicity. Those are strong numbers, double-digit numbers. And as you can see in the graph, it's not just about 2019. We're seeing those strong results over time. So 2014, 17, and 2019. So a steady increase. Next slide. Now that's just one reference point, meaning the McKinsey study. Here are a couple of additional data points for you to think about. Diverse teams are 87% better at making decisions. The Harvard Business Review indicates in their 2018 study that diverse organizations increase revenue related to innovation by 19%. Additionally, cognitive diversity enhanced teams' innovations up to 20%. Ladies and gentlemen, I tell you, the numbers do not lie. Next slide. Now, we talked about the business imperative, but there's also a component of diversity that's related to the personal imperative. And I believe that the personal imperative, the personal case, is much stronger than the business case. We are having a conversation about business imperative more and more frequently across organizations. And although very much needed, we cannot forget again about that personal imperative. What do we mean by the personal imperative? Much like organizations have goals, strategies, and objectives, so do individuals. And much like organizations want to reap positive results from the work that they do, so do individuals. And diversity, particularly the feeling of inclusion, can do that for individuals. And because organizations are made up of individuals, the personal case is again much stronger than the business case. And the personal imperative feeds the business imperative. So here again, another report or study from McKinsey. And this is what they're calling their inclusion model that they've developed. And it's an index that they've created with the goal of identifying a scientific way to measure inclusion, primarily focusing on the left side. So you see where it says the personal experience. This aspect, focusing on the left side, one aspect that they attempt to measure again is that personal experience for the employee. The personal experience index captures how employees individually experience belonging, whether they feel encouraged to bring their full authentic selves to work, and how empowered they are to making meaningful contributions. So again, what employee wouldn't want to experience those things, right? Authenticity, belonging, and meaningful work. So again, we recognize that diversity and inclusion is directly tied to the well-being of the individual. Next slide. A few more stats for you. And again, I did not tell you, I'm an actuary by trade. So this is where all the numbers are coming from. That's why Lisa and I gel so well together. Numbers don't lie. So DEI within organizations increased engagement by 2 times. 75% of employees cover in the workplace. And the reason why I really pointed out this particular stat is because when you think about code switching and being able to bring our authentic selves to the workplace, 75% of employees are doing that. That is a large number and a number that has to be addressed. And then lastly, inclusive leaders increase employees' feelings of inclusion by 70%. Now, why is that important? Because if you think about it, you are all leaders in some form or fashion. And if you're an inclusive leader, that means you're influencing the feelings of the people that you're around. If you're a manager, your employees, by 70%. These are feelings of inclusion. Again, your influence is strong there. Next slide. So with that being said, I've given you kind of the layout, the baseline, the understanding of why diversity is imperative, not only from a business perspective, but from a personal perspective. I'm going to transition over to Lisa here, where she can talk about why AWWC, the Alliance, decided to embark upon this journey and share with you some findings that we thought were very interesting.
Like Kimberly said, we hope that the people that are participating today or listening to our webinar as a recording participated in our survey. We were very intentional about trying to get a diverse audience of our followers to participate in the survey. And we sent out the first batch of our survey to our most active people, defined as the people participating in some of our events over the last 2 years. And we got some of our responses from that batch of people, but not as many as we wanted. And we then opened it up to a broader audience to try to get more people to respond, to get to at least over 500 surveys before we felt like we had a good statistical sampling of our followers to see what is our DEI belief system and what is our background based on these anonymous surveys. So we analyzed 526 total surveys, and like Ngozi said, I too am a numbers nerd from that. And my board counterpart, Marijo Storment, Ngozi and I met many times in trying to figure out what were the right questions to ask, and then what did the data mean? So when we look at our followers, we definitely found that we have lacking in diversity in some key areas. So here's a couple of key statistics. When you think of EEOC type standards, our persons of color, our non-white respondents were only 14%. So we only had 73 out of the 526 people. Our LGBTQ respondents were only 4%. Only 20 people represented themselves as LGBTQ, and only 16% were under 40. So we need to focus on some areas there. And like Kimberly said, I love the way that she worded it. Our male allies are critical to our success. And our organization is for women, but not just of women. So we did have 31 male respondents, which is 6%. When you look at other organizations that focus on specific, typically oppressed type situations, like women, like persons of color, like LGBTQ, you do have a smaller percentage of allies that are there, but it's still an opportunity that we can increase our allyship through making sure that we understand our role in needing allies on our journey. So also, when you look at our followers, we believed that we needed to expand our diversity. And we definitely found that our core demographics are heterosexual, white, Caucasian, high income, highly educated women over 40. And this is what the statistics said. 84% of those people responding had college degrees. 38% had graduate experience. 83% of all of the people responding had incomes over $100,000. And 27%, over a quarter of our followers, are considered in that high income bracket of over $250,000 a year. And interesting, but not surprisingly, 75% of our followers have children, with a large percent still being at home. 60% still at home, and many women had more than one child and more than one child at home. So we know those interesting facts as we navigated last year of our work from home scenarios and how we increase that and seeing it. So when we look at women and being in relationships and what support that we have, because relationships do require support, we found 85%, whether heterosexual or LGBTQ, are in relationships. That's a high percentage of people that are in relationships. And 73% of the women that are single are over 40. So, that was kind of interesting to me. The older that we're getting, maybe we're becoming more independent. Another interesting little tidbit is that one of the identifying factors was whether you consider yourself asexual. And 86% of the women identifying as asexual are in relationships as well. Discrimination, at the core of DEI is making sure that we have a broad understanding of where discrimination is occurring and where we feel that we need to improve on this. So I think the most important factor on this is making sure that we see and are opening ourselves where discrimination could be occurring in our industry, in our personal lives, and what do we do about that? 20% of our respondents disagreed that we have discrimination. That's either disagreed or strongly disagreed that we have discrimination in our industry. And they believed, same 20% believe that we are already do enough for equal opportunity. I found that to be a little eye-opening of what our population believes about our DEI journey. And Ngozi's going to talk more about that. So let's dig down into that. 48% of the women responded saying they experienced gender discrimination. So you know that the majority of the people in our population are women. And so almost half say they have discrimination in the workplace, where only 30% in their personal life. In slicing and dicing these numbers and trying to figure out any something more meaningful, I wanted to look at that by age, and I found that of the people that were under 40, 62% believe they have gender discrimination in the workplace. So that one surprised me, thinking that the older women might have more experiences with discrimination in the workplace, but it didn't pan out that way. So 62% were under 40. Of the women respondents that experienced age discrimination, there were 27% at work, with 69% of these women having age discrimination in their personal life. Wow. Okay, so 20% have age discrimination at work, but when you look at them in their personal life, it's a bigger discrimination based on age and personal life. When we look at race, of our non-white women respondents, 57% experienced discrimination in the workplace, compared to 60% in their personal life, where only 10% of the white women had discrimination in the workplace. Okay, that's a big gap there between Ngozi's passion of our BIPOC women versus our non-BIPOC. And the last kind of big category was our LGBTQ women. Although it wasn't a large response, 45% said they have discrimination in the workplace, with 68% in their personal life, compared to less than 1% of heterosexual women say they have discrimination in their work life or their personal life. So again, you can see some big gaps there in our belief, our discrimination. One of the things that you see in women particularly, we're typically the household managers and not perceived as the breadwinners. Our survey says we are by far the breadwinners, and we're also the household managers. So 72% of all of our women respondents said they are both. They are the breadwinner of their household and they manage. And remember, 85% of our population are in relationships. On the flip side, of our men, 48% said they're both the breadwinner and the household manager. I'm curious on that, how that exists in our non-Alliance of Women in Workers' Comp men, but I do believe that our allies are those men that participate in household managers because they see that value. Authenticity. Ngozi talked about the McKinsey study and how being authentic and showing up and feeling like you belong in the workplace is critical. So we asked a question very intentionally around hiding or covering. Who feels they have to hide something in the workplace? So the largest area was LGBTQ women say they have to hide their sexual orientation. 40% do that. 10% of the non-white women say they have to hide their race. Obviously, there's a strong physical appearance there that can define race, but not always. So that's still an interesting fact there. Other factors that we looked at were outside of the typical things. We looked at broadening hiding based on disability, physical appearance, mental challenges, physical challenges, political views and religious beliefs. And some of those things panned out, that 27% of the women feel like they have to hide their political views. In our divisive society that we have today, I think that's critical that we focus on looking at what is the reason people are having to hide. And 12% have to hide their religious views. So what did we learn? Ngozi, what do all these statistics and numbers mean?
So definitely, thank you for kind of going over those interesting data points. And so, from looking at the comprehensive findings and the results and the responses, we really felt that we could identify 3 themes of focus for the Alliance. And so we'll go over what those themes are, but also talk to some of, again, those stats that really support these endeavors. So what we learned is that 1, creating an inclusive environment starts with exploring your personal diversity journey. So previously I referenced the fact that the business imperative is foundationally based on the personal imperative. And so that holds true here, right? In order for the organization, the Alliance, to move forward in its diversity journey, we must first understand what is the status, where are the followers as it relates to their own individual personal diversity journeys. And we questioned, and what came out of that, and one of the questions we had is, how can we support individuals in their personal diversity journey? And again, we'll talk about stats that kind of lead us towards that conversation. We also learned that, there is a desire for interaction and engagement. So how do we create environments so that we can foster that amongst diverse groups? Again, we have our geographical locations, and definitely since COVID, that has hindered our ability to kind of, get into physical spaces with each other. But it's more than that, right? How do we create that sense of belonging so people can feel comfortable being in those spaces and places, regardless of their differences? And then lastly, kind of, looking at the programming, looking at the content, how can we be intentional about what we deliver? And it's really, looking at it from differently in the sense that rather than saying we're going to have programming focused on diversity, how do we start to overlay diversity in our content that's already established? And so that's looking at, again, being intentional, not only about, who's on the panel or who's speaking, but again, what are those speaking points or talking points that are being reviewed? And really looking at embedding diversity into the Alliance DNA. So let's talk about kind of some of the whys to how do we got to these themes. Organizational diversity starts with individual diversity. And I'm sorry the print is so small here, but we'll definitely give you some additional information, and a copy potentially will be made available to everyone regarding this PowerPoint. But when we start to talk about organizational journey, right? So start with the Alliance journey. The percentage of respondents of color, and this is coming out of the assessment, out of the survey. So the percentage of respondents of color who witnessed discrimination within AWWC were higher than white respondents. And this was consistent among all BIPOC groupings. Now, this is telling. Now, let me tell you that, when we did the survey, we got the responses. We looked at, if you remember, those that took it, that we asked the question around discrimination, what you experienced versus what you witnessed, but then also looked at it from the sense of what you witnessed and experienced in your personal life, what you witnessed and experienced in your professional life at work, but then what you witnessed and experienced within AWWC. And so what we identified is that respondents witnessed some level of discrimination even within AWWC. Now, granted, it was nothing compared to what they witnessed within work or within their personal lives. But again, we're talking about the Alliance's diversity journey and how we can use this information to enhance diversity within the organization. And so this is telling because, again, there is certain levels of discrimination, and that those respondents of color are experiencing or witnessing that discrimination at a higher rate. And again, consistent across the BIPOC groupings. Additionally, as we go along the organizational journey, within the majority, so white respondents, there were differences that were identified as the subject of discrimination. So again, we're talking about race in that first stat, but there were other areas of discrimination that were identified even within the white majority. And those differences included sexual orientation, political beliefs, race, ethnicity, which I already referenced, gender, and religious beliefs. So that indicates that, again, we need to be thinking about how do we create this inclusive environment beyond just race. There are other components that respondents are indicating that, again, at nominal levels, but they still exist, that they are witnessing or experiencing some level of discrimination. Now we start to transition into kind of, again, the individual. 87% of respondents have witnessed no or little discrimination, stereotyping, and stigma in their work life. So going back to some of the stats that Lisa referenced earlier. However, many respondents indicated that they have been victim to discrimination related to their identities at work. So if you really look at that, we have a large number of respondents, many respondents who said, yes, I experienced it. I've been the victim of discrimination in my workplace based on my identities. However, again, a large percent are saying, but I don't witness it. I don't see the stereotyping and discrimination in my workplace. So again, we have a little bit of a kind of a contrast. We experience it, but we don't witness it. And the opportunity here is how to help individuals start to look at discrimination, not only as something that they're experiencing themselves, but how do they help others who are in places or experiencing and being victimized and based on their identities. And so moving from a bystander status, right? How do we help individuals move from bystanders to upstanders, where they're not just experiencing it, but being able to witness it and do something when they witness it. And so again, identifying what is keeping individuals who have experienced it for themselves, so they know it exists to some degree, from helping others and supporting others and being allies for others. Next, we again continue moving further into this individual journey. Respondents reference that they experience discrimination in a higher number of identities in their personal lives than in their professional lives. So again, relating back to some of the stats that Lisa referenced earlier. So yes, we're experiencing discrimination in our workplace, but we're saying in our personal lives even more so, based on a higher number of identities, a higher number of differences. So to that point, so how do we cope? How do we deal with that if we're experiencing more discrimination or feeling less of a sense of belonging in our personal lives? And this last bullet here, this last stat around what are those areas of discrimination? Here, as it relates to the personal lives, sexual orientation, 91.3% referenced some level of discrimination based on sexual orientation, economic background, 87.23, and political beliefs, 86.45. These are very different than what people are indicating are the identities that they're experiencing as it relates to discrimination in their work lives. In their work lives, it's gender, 90.26, it's age, as Lisa mentioned, 78.33, but then also intelligence, 77%. So again, we're looking at these different identities and we're understanding that people are at very different places in their own individual diversity journeys. And so how do we help them move forward in their diversity journeys in order to support the organization's, the Alliance's diversity journey? Next slide. So that second theme that I referenced earlier was about the interaction and the engagement. We asked respondents, again, some of you participated, about what are your diversity goals? What do you want to achieve as you move along your diversity journey? And we were really encouraged by the responses. 51.43% indicated they wanted, helping to expand diversity was one of their goals. 45.75% indicated placing more value on celebrating cultural differences was one of their goals. Also, increasing how I interact with diverse people who are different than me, 44.93 said that was one of their goals. And then over almost 60% indicated becoming a better mentor and ally to diverse groups of people was one of their goals. So hence, we have a community of respondents, a community of followers that want to move forward in enhancing their own diversity or achieving their diversity goals through interaction and engagement with those that are not like them. And we really feel through the conversation of allyship, which we've had that conversation, we'll continue to, but the development of affinity groups potentially, and mentorship programs and sponsorship programs to really help our followers move their diversity goals to a place that they feel that they're achieving progress. And so again, that interaction and engagement is more about how can the Alliance help to foster that within the organization, but again, help people achieve the diversity goals that they've identified through the assessment. Next slide. And so this last slide is really about the programming and the content. So if you think about kind of those three areas, if you think about kind of understanding where individuals are as it relates to their individual journeys, right? We want to talk about foundational aspects to the programming and to the content. We want to talk about, engaging in interaction. What does that really look like? And then also kind of how do we reinforce this so it's sustainable? So we're embedding it into our DNA. So it's not something that we have to, intentionally talk about, meaning saying diversity is here, but it's just inherent in what we do. And so what you'll see is some ideas that came before the actual assessment around where we thought the content might be, or where we thought programming might focus some areas, be some focus areas from a programming perspective. And so we see that, even based on some of the stats, the data, the conversation we've already had, there are some parallels. But again, looking at the assessment results, looking at the data points, this is an opportunity for us to fine tune the content ideas here and the program offerings that we have, not only for the rest of 2021, but going into 2022 and beyond. And so, Mary Jo, I know you're very involved in the programming. Any thoughts here that you'd like to share with the audience around where we think programming can go as it relates to the assessment and our findings from the survey?
I had to pop myself off mute, and what I want to say is that the programming I think that we have in store for the remainder of 21 and 22, and I know Kimberly will talk a lot more about this, but the programming that we have is, I think, is very rich, I think is relevant and exciting. So I wanted to make a quick comment about that before I hand it over to Kimberly.
Yeah, great. And such wonderful, wonderful information. And thank you to Ngozi and your syndicate for helping us through this, and Lisa for really guiding us around what those results might mean, interpretation, and all together. Then we take this information and say, where do we go? What have we learned, and how can we create a content roadmap that can help us with DEI? One thing I think about, given DEI in general in our industry, is that most often the attendees at conferences or events like what the Alliance offers, the attendees for DEI tend to be the diversity leaders. And what we want to be able to do at the Alliance is really individually, as was already stated, improve our diversity journeys, to become more aware, to think about it in new ways. And then we're so fortunate to have our ambassadors who will also host collaborative conversations. So we can participate in a webinar and then have a collaboration on the topic, where in a safe space we can really begin to dig in about our personal and our professional diversity journeys. So with that, you see here some of the future content. What we have planned to come in the near term: unconscious bias training and microaggressions. You know, to some, these have been trainings our companies have offered, but then oftentimes the diversity leaders walk away, or we've had the training and we haven't really been supported and taken the steps to be intentional about applying those. And so regardless of whether you've had an unconscious bias training or microaggression training in the past, we're going to offer that. And many of you have asked for it. You asked for it, frankly, even before we did the survey, but certainly that will be really helpful. We decided to have a two-part series on emotional intelligence. You know, how we are triggered, or which is the term of the day, I think, or really react. What impacts us? What are our blind spots? And this ties right in to DEI. Some may say, well, it's a professional development, you know, to improve my personal skill sets, but certainly it applies to DEI. And crucial conversations. Who is it that's giving us that information? And is there maybe a block to us engaging and being truly inclusive? How do we deliver conversation, deliver maybe news that somebody may not find appealing and feel heard about? And how can we have crucial conversations successfully so that, again, we can advance our DEI journeys and along the way become better leaders and team members as well. We have a wonderful event on executive presence planned at the National Work Comp and Disability, now called National Comp. That's in October. And for those of you who may not be at that conference, you too will be able to engage in those sessions, because we have not only in 2021, but in a book club planned in 2022 around this, as well as many webinars and collaboration. So that's kind of a little bit more on the shorter term. And then you see here on the slide about engaging diverse groups. We have had such wonderful feedback, specifically from our women of color, around other organizations the Alliance may be able to partner with, so that we can not only create a more inclusive environment. But we can all learn of what else is out there and how our organizations can be better. Allyship is important to all of us. It seems that certainly those of us on this webinar today, we believe in supporting each other in our industry and being an ally for DEI. And yet we really are asked at the Alliance frequently, how can I be better? And how can I advance those conversations? So, you know, these other areas out there, imposter syndrome, we're going to hit on that. That's been a topic you all have asked for. You have wanted to address this because it's not something that's easy to get over. And our male followers have said they too question themselves. So I know sometimes people say a male wouldn't have, you know, men wouldn't have questioned whether they could take that job. You know, imposter syndrome really is an important topic, and certainly as we've learned through our DEI assessment that it's important. So, you know, what I would say is, and I know Lisa and I and Marijo are passionate about this, and it's one of the reasons that Ngozi is such a great partner for us. We don't plan to be an organization with a track, if you will, on DEI. We're not going to create and say we have personal professional development and then we have DEI and business acumen, because what we want is in our content and in our organization, in our hearts, in our passions, that DEI is part of our DNA. And I know many of you have heard me say that before, but in the DNA, meaning that it's comfortable to talk about, that we're willing to take the opportunities to create diversity amongst those that we bump elbows with at conferences, in our teams, in the Alliance, and in your personal lives as well. So that's some of the content, and thanks Ngozi and Marijo for pushing this over my way. I know the next slide is Q&A, and we have Lauren on following any questions that have come up to this point, and certainly use the chat feature, provide your question, because certainly we can continue talking about the survey and plans, but we'd love to hear from you. Lauren?
Yeah, we've had a couple questions come in. So one question was when Ngozi was speaking, and it came and said, could you give an example of discrimination in your personal life?
Oh, wow. So I think it, you know, I just make it very simple and very easy. I mean, I'll give a personal experience, you know, that just happened actually the other day. So I was kind of engaging with a conversation, you know, with another parent, and we were talking about our kids, and this, you know, parent happened to be white, and we're, you know, we're kind of talking about sports and things like that. And so, you know, she made a comment about, and you know, it's not so much more discrimination, but just kind of this unconscious bias that individuals have about expecting that because my kids play sports and because they're Black and because they're athletic, that, you know, they're going to, you know, kind of take the lead positions on the teams, and they're going to, you know, kind of take, you know, she was referencing my son, who was kind of a freshman, and she was referencing the fact that, you know, because he's Black and he's athletic, he'll be the, you know, he'll be the starting quarterback and take the position from a white quarterback, a student who was older than him and more senior than him. And so again, not that that's discrimination, but personally, I was kind of taken aback because, again, let's be honest, my child is, you know, he's athletic, but he's not all that good. But just to assume that those biases and those you know, perceptions and preconceived notions about Black people and athleticism still exist today, right? And they're still kind of being played out in conversations, especially, you know, when we talk about our youth and our students or whatnot. So I think when we talk about, you know, personal lives, it's our interactions with other families, our interactions within our families, right? Our interactions when we just go to the grocery store, right? And we interact with people. I've had individuals, I'm walking down the grocery, aisle with my kids and my sons. I have 3 sons, and they're tall and they're kind of big, who will not come down the aisle because they see us coming in the grocery store. So I think those are the, where I think you can find certain levels of discrimination, unconscious bias, microaggressions, kind of all that grouping in your personal lives. So hopefully that was a good, a good enough example to kind of explain that. I think there's multitude of examples, not only related to race, that other individuals can give, I can give around how that manifests discrimination. Again, all those things manifest in your personal life.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I'll give a couple of personal examples as well. My wife and I took our daughter to the emergency room, and the doctor said, "Which one of you is the real mother?" And only the real mother can stay here, and the other one needs to leave. That's one of those, you don't even understand that the discrimination in healthcare can exist, but it does. I mean, that's a personal story. And I have countless examples of that type of discrimination.
Thank you. And there was a comment that came in, not a question, but I'll read it out loud. It says, "I tell my kids if we don't look different, we couldn't recognize each other. If we didn't think differently, we couldn't learn from each other." So I thought that was a nice
I
comment.
love that. I love that.
And another question we have says, other than participating in the webinars and conversations, what else can AWWC followers do to help support this important mission?
Yeah, that's a really great question. We on our website, we have a place that you can submit your level of interest in engaging. We have volunteers for speakers. We have followers that have supported us with blogs. We have followers and sponsors, our ambassadors that really help us create content ideas. And we are just about, now that we've had this survey and we have a good idea of the DEI journeys and where we need to go as an organization, that we're just about to launch our opening of our ambassadors. And if you have interest in hosting events, in-person events, and helping us advance our alliance in new geographies, we're going to be very intentional with our application process, our interviewing with our Alliance Ambassador Committee. And those are a few ways, but we will open back up. Let's hope we're opening back up in 2022, and we will have more in-person events. And without volunteers, we wouldn't be able to host these events. Our ambassadors really look for others to help and support. So raise your hand. You may know one of our board members. Feel free to send us an email. We are a close group and meet regularly. And Jennifer Ryan, who leads our content, and Josephine Copeland, who is taking over our ambassador program as Anita Breedlove rolls off the Alliance board later this year. They together we will find a way that you can be involved. So there's a lot of ways.
Kimberly, can I just add a couple of comments? I think that is a great question, that you can also kind of look at it from the standpoint of, the Alliance is really doing this work to support its followers, right? The initiative is about supporting the diversity journey, not only of the organization, but individuals. I think there's an opportunity kind of to utilize kind of the information that's being taught and take it back into your work lives and take it back into your personal lives. I think that becomes the opportunity of doing more, right? So don't just, take it all in and say, okay, I got it, right? And I got it as it relates to the Alliance. But how can you apply the things that are coming out of the programming and the conversations that are being had, the tools and the resources that are being offered? How can you take that and move it into your workplace and your personal lives? And again, I reference kind of the bystander to upstander, right? How do you start to, transition from that, right? So, experiencing it yourself, but not standing in place of or standing up for others in other in other spaces and places. So I think there's an opportunity to say, okay, I support this initiative by taking what I learned, taking what I receive, and applying it in other areas where they might not have the same awareness and openness around diversity.
Wonderful comments. Thank you for that ad. Lauren?
Yes, we have a couple more questions here. One says, I was trying to follow the results, but did it say that 40% of respondents did not think that discrimination still existed, or that we already do enough to be inclusive?
It was 20%. So 20% of our respondents said they disagreed or strongly disagreed that there's any discrimination in our industry. And it was the same percentage, about 20%, that said there's not anything else that we need to do to encourage diversity or equal opportunity.
Okay, thank you. And on the last question, I'll read the whole comment here. It's nice. It says, this is my first time attending an Alliance of Women virtual meeting. I am the chairman of our newly created Diversity Council with the Bureau of Workers' Compensation for the state of Tennessee. I enjoyed the conversation and would love to share the DEI presentation with our council members. Are you providing copies of today's presentation or at least stat results? Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much. That must be Abby, and we appreciate, I think it might be, and I really appreciate you joining us today. We will have a full report write-up of all of our results. So there is more information available that will be forthcoming. And I want to say that for everybody to know that we will have a formal write-up. We didn't want to delay getting the information out to you. And so we felt that pulling these hot buttons, so to speak, or these trends that stood out to us, that we would share these initially. So that's forthcoming. And this event is also recorded. And so anyone that wanted to watch this, share it with their team. I know some on this video webinar today, some watch and then come together as a team and say, you know, what's this mean for you? And so that's one of the reasons why we are allowing this to be on demand. And then, yes, I've had texts and emails coming in during the event. Will we get a copy of the PowerPoint? And we'll make sure that there's a PDF version that will be available. You can certainly email me for that. But it will also be available on the Alliance's website at allianceofwomen.org, where all of our content is available. So I hope that helps. And I think Lauren said, is that our last one, or did another come in, Lauren?
That was our last one.
Okay, wonderful. Well, before we close, I'd like Ngozi to give you an opportunity. We've got just a couple more minutes, but an opportunity to share some final thoughts, if you would, please.
Definitely. I will tell you that it has been thus far a joy working with the Alliance. And I say that because based on the survey results and the assessments, I'm encouraged about the desire of the respondents to do more, right? Now, granted, I think, Lisa would agree, there's some data points that we want to dig into. We want to figure out the whys, why the respondents are responding in this fashion or feeling a certain way, especially around, again, that 20% that we referenced earlier. But this is great work. This is great work that the Alliance is doing. This is great work that the followers are doing, including those that are here as part of the audience. And so, what I would say is that this is an opportunity to make an impact, not only in the industry, in the Alliance, but also in your own personal life. So when we start to talk about diversity, again, not to be too repetitive, but really take the time to kind of be reflective and how you can utilize some of these, again, resources, tools, or even conversations to make a difference in your own personal lives and the lives of others. So again, encouraged by the work, encouraged by the fact that we will be doing more to support the diversity journeys of the followers in the organization, and really ask that people keep, an open mind and understand that this is a process, right? Diversity, Rome wasn't built in a day. And this will take time and effort and commitment and intentionality from everyone. So thank you for participating today and listening to the results. And I hope that you will continue to engage on a go forward basis around the DEI efforts that the Alliance continues to pursue.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Ngozi. And really thank you to all of you for participating, because it's you and your desire to be better, to create a belonging environment, and to not only help the Alliance be better, but certainly your companies. And so kudos to you. Thank you for joining us on this journey. And no doubt we will be working through our individual diversity journeys for, in my opinion, a long period of time, because it is a journey. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you to Lauren for hosting. We look forward to seeing you all soon on a next Alliance virtual event. And until October, we won't be in person. Let's hope the Delta stays away so we can be in Las Vegas. But take care, everybody. Thanks again.
Bye.